Hello, I hope you're well and importantly safe. I wanted to talk to you about something I was thinking about the other day. I was reading Genesis and the creation account again, and it made me think of an argument that's often given against religion, which is called the God of the gaps. And it imagines people of a backward time who would come across gaps in their knowledge, things they weren't able to explain, and either out of that inability or a superstition, they would put in that gap a God who could do whatever they wanted. And the idea is that as we've become more advanced as a society, as we've garnered more knowledge, as our science has improved, those gaps have become smaller and smaller and their frequency less and less. And so the need for a God as an explanatory power has become less and less. And the conclusion is that one day we will fill all the gaps in our knowledge and we will have no need of a divine being to be able to explain them. I've never been a great fan of the God of the Gaps argument because I think it unfairly characterises people of previous generations. And certainly when I look at my own faith and the history of that throughout the generations and even the really ancient things in the Bible, we don't see people who are claiming God as a cover for their ignorance or to replace knowledge, but what we see are people who view God as the foundation of their knowledge. And even science as an endeavour started as people who wanted to get to know the mind of God, who wanted to know how God worked in this world. But it does make me think. It made me think that people of a previous time were very conscious of their need of God, and not so much a God of the gaps, but a God of the needs. And so, before a time of artificial light, people were very conscious that they needed the sun and they needed the moon, and they're very grateful for the God who gave them those and sustained those. They needed them to tell the time, they needed them to tell the seasons, or to even navigate, and to just give them light in general. And your harvest one year, if it was plentiful, was no guarantee that the next year would be the same, or that you would still have fertile soil. And so they were conscious of their need of the God who blessed their land with fertility. And when you worked in those days, you were basically paid enough for one day's provision. It was quite literally your daily bread, and there's no guarantee that you'd wake up and be able to work the next day, either lack of availability of a job, or you might be ill or injured, or any reasons, and you'd go hungry that day. And so you're very conscious of your need of a God who was your provider. Now, in today's society, we have things like artificial light, and we're less reliant on the lights in the sky to tell the time or to navigate, because we've got compasses, or to be able to see. We've even been able to harness energy, so we know that we have it on demand. We have salaries these days, and so we're able to budget. Some people have been lucky enough to have holiday pay and sick pay. We have fridges and freezers, and we're able to keep our food better for longer. And so we know that if we have food today, then it's quite likely we will have food for the next few days as well, or even weeks. And we have agricultural science and farming practices. That means we have pretty high ideas and pretty high confidences in being able to know what the yield for a specific year will be. And all these things help to take our reliance away from a God and become less conscious of the God who is behind these things and sustaining them. The difference is that in the God of the gaps, it pictures a God who retreats in the face of advancing knowledge. But in the God of the needs, it's us who change. It's us who have forgotten our reliance, or who have become more self-reliant. We are the ones that harnessed electricity. We're the ones that invented freezers. We're the ones who came up with these farming practices. And so our consciousness of our need for God, or even our gratitude to God, is less. We start to take things for granted in a world where they come more easily and there is and abundance. Now, I think one of the consequences of that is that before, people who lived daily very conscious of their need for God knew exactly who to turn to when the bigger things came. They knew exactly who to turn to when their country was under attack, or when there was famine, or a drought, or sickness. And in today's society, there's things that happen, and we're just at a loss of what to do. They're too big for us. And that same instinctiveness of where to turn isn't there, because in many ways we've forgotten our need of God. So, for example, in the midst of a pandemic, we very much feel out of control and we wonder who to turn to. There's events in the world that break our heart and we're dismayed, but we don't know where to take that despair. And even just now, very prominently, is the issue of racism in our world, and there's very much a righteous anger that sprung up from America and is felt in many countries all over the world, because although very obvious and it's come to a head in recent days over in America, it's by no means a problem unique to them. But we wonder how to give expression to that anger in a good way, in a way that makes a difference, in a way that fights against an evil that we cannot believe that in the 21st century we're still fighting against. In the Bible, when people felt a despair, or they felt despondent and that there was no hope, they were very rarely, if ever, given an explanation of what was going to happen or a reason for what was happening, but they were reminded of God's power. In the Bible, in Isaiah chapter 40, it says this from verse 25: "To whom will you compare me? Or who is my equal, says the Holy One. Lift your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these? He who brings out the starry host one by one and calls them each by name, because of his great power and mighty strength. Not one of them is missing." In today's world, we are less overtly conscious of our need for the sun and the moon and the stars as lights for our daily routine and activity, as people were in this time. But we can still walk outside of a clear evening and we can look up to the expanse of the sky and we can see its beauty and its vastness, and in awe we can wonder at how powerful must God be if he's able to create something like this, if his vastness is reflected by the vastness of the universe. How powerful must he be? And the good news is that God doesn't just hoard his power and keep it with him up in heaven, but God is here and with us, and he is powerful and he is active in our world today. And it makes sense for me in all things, even the small things, to turn to God, but especially in the things that just make me feel at a loss, that are too big for me to understand, or I realize I have no influence over, and I take them to God. And I take them to God in prayer. And that's helpful in two ways, because prayer changes me as well. It's difficult to pray for an end to racism without opening up your heart to God to search you for your own prejudice. But also it's in God that there is wisdom and insight and power and strength. And what we do is not pray as a substitute for action. It's not a license to do nothing, but it's an invitation to join in with God, and for all we do, to do it in his power. May God bless you.